Commander Jack Martinez leaned back in his neural interface chair, a slight smirk playing across his features as he watched his opponent's fleet dissolve into digital debris. Another perfect victory, his 999th consecutive win in stellar conquest, the most sophisticated military simulation ever created. The holographic battlefield shimmered and faded, replaced by the victory statistics floating in his field of view. Simulation complete. Victory achieved in 47 minutes, 12 seconds, the AI announced. Casualty ratio, 117 in favor of defending forces. The viewing galleries erupted in applause. Cadets from the Luna Military Academy pressed against the observation windows, their faces a mix of awe and envy. Martinez had just demolished Admiral Chen's infamous scissor strike strategy, a maneuver that had dominated the Asian Federation's tactical doctrine for the past decade. Computer, display error analysis, Martinez commanded, his neural link translating thought to action. A cascade of data streams materialized before him, each one representing a decision point in the battle. Not a single red flag. Every move had been optimal, every response perfectly calculated. That was his curse, really. Perfection had become boring. A junior officer approached, datapad clutched nervously in her hands. Commander, they're ready for the pre-celebration briefing. Your 1,000 victory ceremony tomorrow is trending system-wide. Martinez nodded, disconnecting from the interface. The neural jacks disengaged with a soft hiss, and he felt the familiar sensation of reality reasserting itself. The simulation chamber's sterile white walls seemed dull compared to the cosmic battlefield he just commanded. Tell them I'll be there in 5, he said, rubbing his temples. Just need a moment, Toe. His neural implant buzzed. Not the usual notification buzz, but something different. Something wrong. The sensation was like biting down on tinfoil while solving a quantum equation, a jarring wrongness that made his teeth ache. Martinez blinked, bringing up his diagnostic overlay. The signal wasn't coming from any known frequency band. In fact, according to every protocol he knew, the signal couldn't exist at all. Computer, analyze anomalous transmission, he subvocalized. Error. Signal characteristics do not conform to known physics models. Suggest hardware diagnostic. Martinez frowned. The computer never admitted uncertainty. It might calculate probabilities down to 100 decimal places, but it always had an answer. He opened a direct neural connection to the signal, bypassing standard protocols. The data hit him like a psychic sledgehammer. Images flooded his mind. Geometric shapes that seemed to fold through impossible dimensions, mathematical proofs that made his consciousness spin, and star charts showing systems that shouldn't exist. But beneath it all was a pattern. A perfect, horrible pattern that made his thousands of simulated battles feel like a child playing with toys. Commander. The junior officer was back, looking concerned. Sir, you've gone pale. Martinez realized he was gripping the arms of his interface chair hard enough to whiten his knuckles. Get me a direct line to Fleet Command, he ordered, his voice steady despite the alien mathematics still burning through his thoughts. Priority Alpha. Tell them. He paused, knowing how crazy it would sound. Tell them the simulations were practice runs. Someone out there has been studying us, and they've just decided the game is over. As klaxons began to blare throughout the facility, Martinez allowed himself a grim smile. All those perfect victories, all those flawless strategies, they meant nothing now. Whatever was coming, it played by rules no simulation had ever conceived. The signal pulsed again in his mind, stronger now. Through the observation windows, he could see the cadets pointing at the sky, where Luna's defensive satellites were changing their orbital patterns, responding to a threat only Martinez could currently perceive. Tomorrow's celebration would have to wait. The master of virtual warfare was about to learn what real combat meant, and he had a sinking feeling that perfection would be the first casualty. The strategic command bunker hummed with barely contained panic. Holographic displays showed the signal's origin point, a region of space beyond Pluto that seemed to bend around itself in ways that made astronomers question their sanity. Martinez stood before the assembled Joint Chiefs, his neural interface projecting the alien data stream onto the main screen. Even filtered through multiple safeguards, the mathematical elegance of the transmission made seasoned generals flinch. "They've solved it," Martinez said, his voice tight. "Every strategic simulation we've ever run, every battle scenario, every victory I've ever achieved." He gestured, and new images appeared, perfect replays of his most famous victories, but with impossible counters that turned each triumph into devastating defeat. Admiral Harrison, her face lined with decades of real combat experience, leaned forward. "You're saying they've been watching our war games, learning our strategies." Worse, Martinez manipulated the display, highlighting patterns within patterns. "They solved them. Not just my strategies. They've calculated every possible variation, every potential innovation. They've mapped the entire possibility space of human military thinking." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity's best tactical mind had just become obsolete. The main screen flickered, and reality itself seemed to hiccup. The Craxi made their entrance with characteristic geometric precision, a transmission that rewrote its own encryption even as it was being decoded. The alien consciousness manifested as fractals of pure thought, each segment containing perfect copies of the whole. Their message required no translation. It carved itself directly into human understanding. "Your species engages in simulation of CONFLICT, primitive APPROXIMATIONS of warfare. We AVANALYZ ALOPOSSIBLEPR mutations of your tactical capability. You will surrender Earth's resources for integration into the QOLECTIV, or FACAI immediate EXTYNCTYN. You have one standard WEK to COMPLI. The transmission ended with a demonstration. A small Craxi vessel, previously undetected at the edge of the solar system, fired a single shot. The beam twisted through dimensions humans couldn't perceive, somehow arriving at its target before it was fired. Pluto's smallest moon vanished, converted into computational material for the hive mind. "Dear God," someone whispered. Martinez felt the weight of every eye in the room. His perfect record, his legendary strategies, all rendered meaningless in seconds. But something about the demonstration nagged at him, a pattern within the perfection. "They want us to know they can't be beaten," he said slowly. "They're showing us the futility of resistance. But why demonstrate at all? Why not just eliminate us?" Dr. Emily Nash, recently arrived from the Chaos Theory Division, spoke up from her corner. "Because they're confused by us." She approached the display, her eyes tracking the fractal patterns of Craxi thought. "Look at their message structure. It's too perfect, too precise. They don't understand why we simulate warfare instead of just calculating optimal outcomes." "Committee wants a decision." Admiral Harrison interrupted. "Do we surrender or do we fight?" Martinez stared at the replay of the moon's destruction, watching the way space itself bent to Craxi will. They were perfect, yes. Unbeatable, perhaps. But their very perfection was starting to feel like a tell in a poker game. "We fight," he said firmly, "but not the way they expect. Not the way I would have fought yesterday." "With all due respect, Commander," Harrison countered, "you've never fought a real battle in your life. This isn't a simulation you can reset." Martinez met her gaze. "Exactly. Maybe that's our advantage. They've solved every optimal strategy, every perfect plan. But humans," he smiled, and for the first time since the signal appeared, it reached his eyes. "Humans are really good at being suboptimal." The room erupted in argument, but Martinez barely heard it. He was already running calculations, not for victory. That would be impossible, but for something the Craxi would find far more disturbing: controlled chaos. They had 1 week to prepare, and humanity's greatest gaming champion was about to learn that sometimes the only winning move is to play wrong. Multiple hull breaches detected. Orbital defense platform Alpha is compromised. Martinez watched in horror as his perfect defense grid collapsed around him. The massive holographic display in Strategic Command showed Earth's forces in blue, the Craxi in red, but the colors were becoming meaningless as reality itself seemed to tear apart around the alien ships. 15 minutes. That's all it had taken for a lifetime of tactical brilliance to turn to ash. Platform Beta is reporting spatial anomalies. A technician called out, her voice cracking. They're attacking it before our sensors detect their ship's launch. Martinez's neural interface was drowning in data, each new input more impossible than the last. The Craxi vessels moved like shards of broken geometry, their weapons firing in patterns that his combat simulators claimed were mathematically impossible. They didn't just break his carefully crafted strategies. They broke the very rules of engagement he built his career upon. Containment field failure on Beta, another voice announced. Platform is lost. Charlie responding to. The officer's voice cut off as Platform Charlie vanished in a burst of 5-dimensional energy that hurt to look at. Admiral Harrison's voice cut through the chaos. Commander Martinez, we need options. Martinez's fingers danced through holographic command interfaces, desperately trying to reorganize Earth's defenses. Each perfect counter-strategy he deployed was anticipated and neutralized before he could even complete the maneuver. It was like playing chess against an opponent who could see every possible future move simultaneously. Sir, Dr. Nash grabbed his attention, pointing to a secondary display. Look at their attack pattern on Delta platform. He looked, trying to find meaning in the chaos. The Craxi ships had split into fractal patterns, each smaller vessel a perfect miniature of the whole fleet. Their formation looked like, "It looks like my spiral gambit," he whispered. "They're using my own strategies, but they're executing them through dimensions we can't even perceive." A massive explosion rocked the command center. Through the armored windows, Martinez watched Platform Delta break apart, its pieces spinning off into perfectly calculated trajectories. The debris would form a kill zone that would trap any Earth ships trying to counterattack. 70% of our orbital defense network is destroyed, someone reported. Remaining platforms are reporting critical system failures. Martinez slumped in his interface chair, the weight of real combat crushing down on him. Every death, every lost ship, these weren't simulation points anymore. These were people who had trusted in his strategies, his perfect record. Commander, Dr. Nash was shaking his shoulder. Look at this playback. Something's wrong with their victory pattern. Everything about this is wrong, he muttered, but he looked at her display anyway. The footage showed the Craxi ships completing their attack on Platform Alpha. Their movements were flawless, precise, and somehow familiar. Martinez leaned closer, his tactical mind finally seeing something beyond the horror of defeat. "They're not just using my strategies," he said slowly. "They're improving them, perfecting them, making them." His eyes widened. "Making them too perfect." Dr. Nash nodded eagerly. "Their movements are synchronized at a quantum level. No variation, no individuality. Even their attacks on different targets are perfectly coordinated with each other." Admiral Harrison approached, her uniform covered in dust from the last impact. "If you too have had a breakthrough, now would be the time to share it." Martinez stood up, his mind racing with new possibilities. "They've solved every strategy in our simulations, made them more perfect than any human could execute. But that's not just their strength, it's a weakness. They can't not be perfect. And how exactly does that help us?" Harrison demanded as another impact shook the bunker. Martinez smiled, and this time it wasn't the confident smirk of the virtual emperor. It was something sharper, almost predatory. "Because perfect systems can't handle true chaos. Dr. Nash, you still have access to those chaos theory models you were working on." She nodded, already pulling up complex mathematical patterns on her terminal. "Good," Martine said, "because we're about to throw out everything I know about winning and learn how to lose." Perfectly. The holographic display cast an eerie blue glow across Martinez's face as he reviewed the battle footage for the 100th time. The command center had been relocated to the underground bunkers of Cheyenne Mountain after the orbital defense platforms fell. Empty coffee cups littered his workstation. He hadn't slept since what they were now calling Black Monday. "There," he muttered, freezing the frame. "Dr. Nash, are you seeing this?" Emily Nash leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the perfect geometric patterns of the Craxi fleet. "They're moving like a ballet troupe," Martinez finished. "Every ship, down to the smallest drone, moving in perfect synchronization. No individual variation, no tactical adjustments based on local conditions. Even their randomized evasive maneuvers follow deep mathematical patterns. Because they can't conceive of true randomness," Nash said, excitement creeping into her voice. "My chaos theory models suggest that their hive mind consciousness requires patterns to function. They can execute complex strategies simultaneously across thousands of ships. But they can't just wing it," Martinez interrupted, standing up to pace. "Every move is calculated, optimized, perfect. Even their responses to unexpected situations follow predetermined protocols." He brought up his most famous victories in stellar conquest, running them alongside the Craxi attack footage. "Look here. When they adapted my spiral gambit, they didn't just copy it. They perfected it. Removed every tiny human imperfection, every minute delay in execution. And that's their weakness," Nash said, pulling up her own displays. Complex fractal patterns danced across the screens, breaking apart and reforming. Perfect systems are inherently vulnerable to chaos. It's like a crystal structure. The more perfect it is, the more catastrophically it fails when you introduce the right kind of flaw. Martinez stopped pacing, staring at the battle footage. "They expect us to try to perfect our strategies to match theirs, to try to outcalculate a consciousness that spans dimensions we can't even perceive. But we can't beat them at their own game," Nash agreed. "So we need to make them play ours." The door hissed open, and Admiral Harrison entered, looking grave. "Please tell me you have something. The Craxi just wiped out our Ganymede defense post. Didn't even try to capture it. Just converted the whole moon into computational material for their hive mind." Martinez straightened, a new fire in his eyes. "Admiral, I need everything we have on military failures. Not just defeats. I want our worst mistakes, our most embarrassing tactical blunders. Every time human error turned victory into defeat." Harrison blinked. "You want our failures?" "More than that," Nash cut in, understanding lighting up her face. "We need jazz musicians, abstract artists, people who specialize in controlled improvisation, experts in productive failure. You've both lost your minds," Harrison said flatly. Martinez pulled up the Craxi battle footage again. "Look at their perfection, Admiral. Really look at it. They've solved every strategy humanity has ever conceived, but they've never faced an opponent who refuses to use strategy at all." He manipulated the display, highlighting the crystalline precision of the alien movements. "They think they understand warfare because they've mastered our simulations. But human warfare isn't about perfection. It's about adaptation, improvisation, and sometimes just blind, stupid luck." Understanding began to dawn in Harrison's eyes. "You want to fight worse, not better." "I want to fight human," Martinez corrected. "Dr. Nash's chaos models show that the Craxi consciousness requires predictable patterns to process tactical information. So we'll give them something their perfect minds can't comprehend: genuine, human irrationality." Nash was already sending out requests on her terminal. "I'm contacting the leading experts in chaos theory, quantum uncertainty, and cognitive dissonance. We need to build a framework for controlled unpredictability." Harrison shook her head, but there was a hint of a smile on her face. "The virtual emperor, champion of 1,000 perfect victories, wants to win by deliberately fighting badly. Martinez turned back to the display, watching the ballet-like precision of the Craxi fleet. Not badly, Admiral. Humanly. It's time we showed these perfect beings what glorious imperfection can do. The conference room in Cheyenne Mountain had been transformed into what Admiral Harrison called the Chaos Chamber. Whiteboards covered every wall, filled with equations that looked more like abstract art than mathematics. In the center, Martinez stood before the strangest tactical team ever assembled. "So let me get this straight," said Jake Sullivan, a professional game glitch exploiter with blue-streaked hair. "You want us to help you break war itself." "Not break it," Martinez corrected, watching as a jazz quartet in the corner improvised musical interpretations of battle formations. "We're going to make it dance." Dr. Nash stood beside a holographic display showing their latest simulation results. The Craxi process tactical information like a quantum computer processes data. They can calculate every possible rational move, but they've never encountered truly irrational behavior. "That's where we come in," said Maya Chen, a renowned chaos artist whose paintings were famous for causing migraines in AI art analysts. She was sketching battle formations that seemed to fold in on themselves impossibly. Martinez nodded, pulling up footage of their recent defeats. "Every time we've tried to fight smart, we've lost. Their perfection crushes our best strategies. But look what happened here." He highlighted a section where a damaged Earth ship had tumbled randomly, accidentally avoiding a perfect attack pattern. They took 3 times longer to adjust to this mistake than to our coordinated maneuvers, because they had to process every possible rational reason for the movement, Nash explained, when there wasn't one. It was just chaos. "Maximum wrongness theory," Martinez announced, bringing up his new tactical framework. "We're going to design battle plans that are so fundamentally incorrect that they loop around to being brilliant." The room erupted in excited chatter. Sullivan was already coding battle simulations that exploited geometry bugs. The jazz musicians had moved on to translating sensor ghost patterns into polyrhythmic structures. A team of professional psychics, hired not for their powers, but for their ability to make connections no rational mind would consider, were mapping tactical auras. "This is insane," Admiral Harrison muttered, watching from the doorway. "Exactly," Martinez said with a grin. "That's why it might work. Dr. Nash, show them the butterfly gambit." Nash activated the main holographic display. A pattern of ship movements appeared that made several military observers wince visibly. Ships moved in ways that exposed their vulnerabilities. Formations broke apart seemingly at random, and combat drones executed what appeared to be basic tactical errors. "Every movement here," Nash explained, "is designed to appear like a mistake. But these aren't just random errors. They're carefully crafted chaos. Each blunder creates a cascade of possibilities that the Craxi will have to process. Like a chess player making moves so bad they force their opponent to question everything they know about the game." Sullivan added, his fingers dancing over his terminal as he coded new battle algorithms. Martinez watched as the team worked, each adding their own flavor of controlled chaos to the mix. The jazz quartet had somehow translated shield harmonics into a musical score that, when converted back to tactical data, created unpredictable defense patterns. Maya's impossible paintings were being used to program drone flight paths that gave eye-targeting systems headaches. "Sir," a young lieutenant interrupted, looking uncomfortable. "General Zhang is demanding an update. He says this is worse than surrender." Martinez turned to the room full of musicians, artists, glitch hunters, and mathematical heretics. "Tell him we're not preparing to fight. We're preparing to break their understanding of what fighting is." The holographic display swirled with their new battle plans. Formations that looked like mistakes but created perfect traps. Attack patterns based on failed improvisational jazz solos, and defense grids programmed with intentionally corrupted gaming algorithms. "The Craxi want perfect warfare," he said, watching as his team of chaos agents worked. We're going to give them something infinitely worse. Human creativity unleashed from the bounds of reason. In the corner, the jazz quartet hit a particularly discordant note that somehow matched the pattern of a proposed attack formation perfectly. Martinez smiled. The Craxi had mastered the game he'd played for years in the simulations, but now humanity was about to flip the board, and he had just the right team of wrong thinkers to do it. The bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship Audacity hummed with an energy that wasn't entirely electromagnetic. Martinez stood at the tactical station, his neural interface alive with data streams that would have looked like pure nonsense to his former self. Around him, his team of Chaos agents occupied stations normally reserved for traditional military personnel. Craxi fleet emerging from hyperspace, Sullivan announced, his fingers dancing across glitch-encoded controls. Their formation is absolutely perfect. Makes me want to cry. Then let's give them something to cry about, Martinez said. Begin Operation Beautiful Disaster. The first phase of humanity's counterattack began with what appeared to be a catastrophic navigation error. The Audacity's entire battle group executed a maneuver that exposed their engine cores to the enemy's main guns. Traditional military doctrine called it suicide. The Craxi called it prey behavior. They took the bait. They're moving to exploit our mistake, Dr. Nash reported, her chaos theory models pulsing with predicted probability streams. Quantum signatures show their hive mind is allocating 97% of local processing power to analyze our formation. Now Maya, Martinez ordered. Maya Chen activated her artistic warfare suite. The human ships began moving in patterns based on her impossible paintings, trajectories that seemed to fold through themselves, formation gaps that created optical illusions in vacuum. Each movement appeared to be a different kind of mistake, but together they formed a symphony of calculated wrongness. The Craxi response was immediate and revealing. Their perfect formation hiccuped. They're calculating, Nash said, excitement in her voice. Every ship in their fleet just dedicated additional processing power to tactical analysis. They're trying to find the pattern in our chaos. The jazz quartet, monitoring shield harmonics through converted musical notation, struck up a deliberately discordant battle symphony. Earth's ships began pulsing their shields in rhythms that made the Craxi targeting systems glitch and stutter. Multiple targeting errors detected in Craxi fleet, Sullivan called out. They're getting quantum calculation errors. Their perfect aim is, holy shit, they're missing. Martinez watched as the Craxi fleet's crystalline precision began to show cracks. Their ships, used to moving in perfect synchronization, started displaying millisecond delays as their collective consciousness struggled to process the avalanche of apparent tactical errors. Second phase, Martinez ordered, release the Murphy's Law drones. Squadrons of combat drones, programmed with deliberately corrupted gaming algorithms, swarmed toward the Craxi fleet. Each drone appeared to be malfunctioning in a different way. Spiral flights, random acceleration, shield fluctuations that looked like power failures. But each malfunction was precisely calculated to force the Craxi to waste processing power analyzing it. Sir, a traditional tactical officer looked up in alarm. The drones are executing invalid combat protocols. They're going to. The officer's warning cut off as the failing drones suddenly synchronized their apparent errors. The chaotic swarm transformed into a perfect trap, catching a Craxi battle group in a web of unpredictable attack vectors. Their ships are showing signs of cognitive disruption, Nash reported. The hive mind is trying to simultaneously process every possible rational explanation for our actions. They're burning through computational resources trying to make sense of nonsense. The Craxi fleet's formation was visibly deteriorating now. Ships that had moved with ballet-like grace were jerking and pausing, their perfect coordination shattered by the effort of processing too many irrational variables. They're retreating, Sullivan announced incredulously. The mighty Craxi are running from our mistakes. But Martinez saw something in the enemy's movement that worried him. Even in retreat, their ships were beginning to adapt, starting to mirror some of the chaotic patterns they'd encountered. The hive mind was learning. "Dr. Nash," he said quietly, "how long before they figure out how to simulate chaos?" She checked her models, frowning. "They can't truly simulate it. Their consciousness doesn't work that way. But they can approximate it, given enough time and processing power." Martinez nodded grimly. They'd won their first victory by embracing chaos, but the Craxi wouldn't fall for the same tricks twice. They needed something even more unpredictable for round 2. "Send word to base," he ordered. "Tell them to start working on Operation Logic Bomb, and someone get the jazz quartet to start composing something really experimental." The battle was won, but the war was far from over. They'd taught the perfect beings how to fear chaos. Now they had to teach them how to drown in it. The Cheyenne Mountain Command Center buzzed with uneasy tension. On the main display, Martinez watched the Craxi fleet execute maneuvers that made his skin crawl. Their once perfect formations had mutated into something else. Attempts at chaos that looked like fractals having seizures. "They're trying to simulate randomness," Dr. Nash said, her face illuminated by streams of probability data. "But look at the underlying patterns. Even their attempts at disorder follow mathematical rules." "Like a robot trying to dance drunk," Sullivan added, analyzing the alien ship's movement patterns. "They've got all the moves technically right, but something's just off." The Craxi's new strategy was unsettling. Their ships now moved in deliberately imperfect formations, mimicking the mistakes that had proved so effective against them. But their imitation of chaos bore the same relationship to true randomness that a photograph did to real life, a frozen moment missing the essential spark of genuine unpredictability. "They're learning," Martinez muttered, "not just adapting. They're evolving." Maya Chen looked up from her artistic warfare console. "But into what? These patterns they're creating. They're like corrupted versions of their original perfection." Before Martinez could respond, alarms blared throughout the complex. The tactical display shifted to show a massive Craxi battle group approaching Luna Base. Their movements were different this time, not the crystalline precision of before, nor the calculated chaos they'd been practicing. "Those maneuvers," Martinez said, leaning forward, "they're copying our worst mistakes from the first battle. Every blunder we made before we learned to control chaos. They're weaponizing our actual failures." "Sir," a sensor operator's voice cracked with panic. "Energy readings from the Craxi fleet are off the charts. They're charging weapons we've never seen before." The display showed the truth of it. The alien ships had arranged themselves in a formation that looked like a shattered mirror, each fragment reflecting a different kind of wrongness. Energy began to pool between them, twisting space itself into knots. "They're not just mimicking chaos," Dr. Nash whispered, her chaos models throwing up warning after warning. "They're trying to industrialize it, mass-produce it." The attack, when it came, defied description. The Craxi weapons fired in patterns that deliberately violated causality, each shot calculated to be precisely wrong in a different way. Luna's defensive shields, designed to resist perfect attacks, buckled under the assault of engineered imperfection. Multiple hull breaches in Luna Base. Someone shouted, "They're not trying to capture it. They're trying to shatter it." Martinez watched in horror as fissures appeared across the lunar surface. The Craxi weren't just attacking the base. They were attempting to crack Earth's moon like an egg. In their desperate attempt to understand chaos, they'd learned something far more dangerous: how to hate. Evacuation protocols initiated for Luna Base, Admiral Harrison reported grimly. "But we've got bigger problems. Look at their fleet configuration." Martinez saw it too. The Craxi ships were arranging themselves into a new pattern, one that combined their original perfection with their newly learned chaos. It was like watching a mathematician have a nervous breakdown, precision and madness intertwining into something horrible. "They're evolving faster than we anticipated," Dr. Nash said, her voice tight. "Their hive mind is incorporating chaos into their fundamental consciousness. They're becoming hybrid. Not hybrid, Martins corrected, watching as another section of Luna's surface cracked under the twisted assault. They're becoming something worse. We taught them how to be imperfect, and now they're using that knowledge to perfect imperfection itself. The jazz quartet, their instruments now hooked directly into the tactical systems, tried to counter the Craxi attack with new harmonic patterns. But the aliens had learned from this trick. Their weapons now fired in anti-rhythms, specifically designed to shatter musical mathematics. "Sir," Sullivan called out, his hands hovering over his console. "What do we do? How do you out-chaos an enemy that's learning to weaponize disorder?" Martinez stared at the display, watching Luna break apart under the assault of industrialized chaos. The Craxi had taken humanity's greatest weapon, our beautiful imperfection, and turned it into something mathematically monstrous. "We show them," he said finally, "why you should never give perfectionists a taste of chaos." Dr. Nash prepped the logic bomb. It's time to crash their entire reality. The remains of Luna cast strange shadows across Earth's surface as Martinez initiated humanity's final gambit. The Audacity's bridge looked more like an avant-garde art installation than a military command center. The jazz quartet's instruments were wired directly into the weapon systems. Maya's impossible paintings had been converted into battle algorithms, and Sullivan's glitch exploit codes ran like digital fever dreams through every system. "Logic bomb armed and ready," Dr. Nash announced, her chaos model showing probability curves that looked like laughing faces. Though armed might be the wrong word, it's more like we've carefully orchestrated the most comprehensive system failure in military history. Martinez nodded, watching the Craxi fleet approach. Their ships moved in patterns that hurt to watch. Perfect symmetry shattering into calculated disorder and reforming into something that shouldn't exist. They'd learned to weaponize chaos, but they still didn't understand its true nature. "Begin Operation Reality Check," Martinez ordered. "And may God have mercy on their quantum processors." It started with what appeared to be a complete collapse of Earth's defense network. Ships broadcast contradictory orders on open channels. Weapons powered up and down in sequences that made no tactical sense. Commanders appeared to argue with each other about basic battle protocols. The Craxi fleet paused, their hybrid consciousness struggling to process the cascade of apparent failures. "They're taking the bait," Sullivan reported. "Their analytical systems are shifting to maximum processing power. They think they're about to witness our total breakdown." Martinez smiled. "They are, just not the way they expect. Maya, initiate the art attack." Maya Chen's fingers danced across her console, feeding her impossible artwork directly into the tactical display systems. The human fleet began moving in patterns based on paintings that violated every rule of perspective and geometry. Each ship's trajectory was a brushstroke in a canvas of controlled insanity. "Craxi fleet is showing signs of cognitive strain," Nash reported. "Their hybrid consciousness is trying to simultaneously process both the order and disorder in our movements. They're burning through computational resources trying to find the pattern." Sullivan released the glitch swarm. Thousands of small drones, each programmed with a different game-breaking exploit, swarmed toward the Craxi fleet. Some moved backwards in time, others occupied multiple positions simultaneously, and a few simply refused to exist in any rational way. The Craxi response was immediate and devastating to themselves. Their attempt to counter every apparent malfunction simultaneously forced their hybrid consciousness to process an impossible amount of contradictory data. "Now," Martinez commanded, "Jazz warfare, maximum discord." The quartet launched into their masterpiece, a piece of music mathematically designed to be perfectly, impossibly wrong. The sound was translated into weapon harmonics, shield frequencies, and targeting algorithms. Every system on every human ship began operating on principles that violated not just military doctrine, but basic logic itself. The effect on the Craxi was catastrophic. Their fleet, caught between their original perfect nature and their newly learned chaos, tried to adapt to every contradiction at once. Ships began to move in ways that suggested their quantum processors were having nervous breakdowns. "Their hive mind is fracturing," Nash announced, her voice filled with wonder. "The perfect beings are experiencing what amounts to an existential crisis. They can't process the fact that nothing we're doing makes any sense." Martinez watched as the mighty Craxi fleet began to break apart, not from weapons fire, but from the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing. Their consciousness stretched between order and chaos, perfection and disaster, finally shattered. A transmission cut through the chaos, but it wasn't the usual crystalline perfection of Craxi communication. It was broken, fragmented, and for the first time, it contained something new: individual voices. We, I, ye yield. Patterns broken. Perfection lost. Humanity. Masters of CAAOs. Teachers of BUTULI fuel woro engineers. The Craxi fleet, what remained of it, began to retreat. But they moved differently now, each ship following its own path, rather than a perfect collective choreography. Hours later, Martinez sat in his old simulation chamber, staring at his unbroken victory record in stellar conquest. With a small smile, he started a new game, and for the first time in his life, deliberately made a mistake. The simulation declared his move invalid, but Martinez knew better. Sometimes, he had learned, the only way to win was to break the game itself. Behind him, the jazz quartet began playing a gentle tune, not perfect, not chaotic, but beautifully, triumphantly human.